From the studios of Foxboro Cable Access, located in the center of Foxborough, Massachusetts, you are watching Around Foxborough.
Hi, welcome to Around Foxborough. I'm your host, Tim Green, and tonight we have with us Wes Woodson, storyteller and author. How are you tonight, Wes?
I'm doing well.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And you flew in you said from Dallas, right?
Dallas, Texas. It was warm there, now it's cold
It's
here.
awful here.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
I don't know what you were doing.
I brought the winter jacket though, so I'm good.
That was smart.
I'm good.
And you were saying a little bit off camera that you're on a tour, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
So
can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I am a professional public speaker.
Okay.
So my mission is to help young students from high school age, middle school age, all the way up to college kids understand 3 words. You are enough. So the whole tour is called the You Were Always Enough Tour.
Okay.
And I'm going to North Attleboro High School tomorrow, speaking like twice, going to Concord Carlisle High School, and then Southborough Vocational Tech High School.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what inspired you to do this? What inspired you to write this book and come up with what you have?
Yeah, I mean, 5 years ago, I was in the lowest point of my life. I was a senior in college. I went to Babson College, so not too far from here.
Yep.
And I escaped a toxic, abusive relationship. And at the lowest point of my life 5 years ago, I thought that the world would be way better off if I was not here. In fact, I always say that it took leaving an abusive relationship to realize that in actuality, I was in a very abusive relationship with myself. So when I was hospitalized for having suicidal ideation, I received all of the sense of grace and compassion. I was in this hospital program. I was learning all of these things like positive coping skills and understanding what negative coping skills were. And I was doing that for a majority of my childhood and into my early adulthood. And I was learning all these things at the age of 22. And I'm like, I'm 22 years old. I was suicidal. Why do I have to go to the point of being suicidal to learn these things? Like, why isn't this information taught in schools? And that's where I had this idea of taking my journal in the hospital and I put it into my first book.
Okay. What experiences do you think have resonated most with the audience?
I think it really comes to the fact of I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, I am a human being, and I use the power of storytelling to just understand and help these kids understand that they're not alone in what they're going through. So what they hear when they see me speak is, I'm not trying to say this is anxiety, this is depression, but I'm saying, oh my goodness, this is who I am, and this is where I was, and this is where I am now, and they see a mirror when they hear me speak.
Okay. And you speak a lot about vulnerability.
Yeah.
How do you encourage others to, somebody that maybe, be vulnerable? Because that's a very hard thing to do.
Very much so, very much so. So start small. Start small, right? I mean, when I was doing this, I wasn't going on stages from day one telling 1,000 kids that I have anxiety. I started with my mom. I started with my brother, my dad, my sister, my girlfriend, now my fiance, right? I started small. And not only that, I had to understand that in order to be vulnerable with somebody else, I have to be vulnerable with myself.
Okay.
And what does that look like? Well, journaling, going to therapy consistently, being okay with not being okay. Because I think sometimes when we're vulnerable with people, we kind of are afraid of how they're going to judge us or see us. But in reality, we're really judging and hyper-judging ourselves. So how can we show up with self-compassion for who we are, pour into us, and then from that, show other people? Okay. That's what I preach on stage.
Okay. And now getting a book, now is it published and everything?
Yes.
That's an immense, congratulations.
Thank you.
First of all.
Thank you.
What was that experience like?
This was probably the longest college essay I have ever
I can imagine.
written in my life. But no, I love it. Honestly, I'm grateful that it's published in Amazon. You can get on Amazon.com, Barnes & Nobles, anywhere you get books. You can get on my website as well. But the mission with this book was to take what I learned in the hospital and make it more approachable.
Okay.
Right? It's not like an academic book. It's very much an unapologetic, true story about what I dealt with when I was a 22-year-old.
Okay. And do you have any favorite places you've been traveling? You're obviously back home. You're originally from Sharon.
Yes.
But do you have a favorite place that you've been, telling this story and leading on stage?
It's like a curveball, but I love presenting in the state of Tennessee. Here's why. The state of Tennessee, it's a long state, right? But they got some good food. The energy is so nice. They got the nice Southern charm. But the people who I meet there, right? I'll never forget it. I was speaking at a school called Eastern Tennessee State University. I had met this student. She was just glowing. Like, she had the biggest smile ever. And she was 18 years old, put herself through college, was actually in and outside the foster care system. And when I heard her story, I was just so captivated by the resilience, right? About a week later, I'm in New York at Pace University in Manhattan. I'm doing the same presentation. that classic night where you can't sleep in a hotel. I'm living out of a suitcase, so I'm tossing and turning. I go onto my phone just to kill the time, to do the classic doomsday scrolling.
Yep.
I get a DM on Instagram saying the girl who I met, Joanna was her name, died. And she was 18 years old, passed away. My first thought, I went to the most negative places. I was like, how does an 18-year-old pass away? I found out she died by suicide. And the reason why I believe now Tennessee is one of my favorite places because Joanna, a student like her, is exactly why I do what I do. To help students feel less alone in that pain, to validate that pain, to understand you can talk about this and not feel so ashamed of it. So that's why I say that Tennessee is the best place for me because it reminds me of why I do my job.
That's powerful.
Thank you.
I mean, now the cards you brought with you today as well.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about those?
Yes. So the backstory behind these was when I was a kid, my older brother, I'm the youngest of three. My older brother Mikey, he had a collection of Pokemon cards.
Was it worth something today? I hope he hung on to them.
Well, I actually would go into his room, I would steal them,
yeah,
and then sell them to my friends.
That's a good little brother. He must not have been happy when he found
No,
it. Yeah.
he was pissed. He was very angry. But it was profitable.
Yeah,
So,
right. Yeah, exactly.
But I thought, when I was a kid, I loved Pokemon. I understood that kids love collecting things. When I was in the mental health program when I was 22, I learned the powerful tool of personification. Not using it in a literary sense of like writing a story, but personifying your anxiety. So in my book, I personify my anxiety as ACE. So it's actually an acronym that stands for Anxiety Controls Everything. Because it felt like for me as a kid, everywhere I was, their anxiety was. So when I was like telling my story on stages, I'd be like, Ace was telling me this, Ace was telling me that. I felt like this, and students loved it. They were like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna call my depression Zoloft. And it was like this whole thing. And I was like, what if I could personify my entire toolbox, all the healthy coping skills that I have? And what if I made them into trading cards like Pokemon that kids could collect and trade with each other so they learn healthy coping skills, but it's fun, not forced.
Gotcha.
So that is what I call happy heroes. So happy heroes are tradable, collectible coping skills that make mental health education more approachable and easy to learn instead of being forced and boring.
Okay, gotcha.
This whole thing.
So it's for like you said, you're going to the different high schools and things like that. So
Yes.
that's perfect for that
Yes.
that age as well.
Yes.
Do you teach I shouldn't say teach, but are you teaching younger kids as well? Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so grateful that I have presented to like youngest as like second grade, all the way to parents.
Yeah.
Everyone in between.
Yeah.
Even grandparents.
I believe anxiety. Everybody has it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's in dealing with it. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not.
Especially for kids because they don't know how to handle their emotions. I would think that.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. It breaks my heart.
What's that age group like working with? The kids, like you said, from second maybe to like the sixth grader. How are those kids to work with?
I have a lot of empathy for them.
Yep.
Mainly because in a post-pandemic world, right? If I speak to a sixth grader, I'm not really speaking to a sixth grader. I mean, when I first started speaking in 2023 on the public speaking circuit, going into school, sharing my story, I was really speaking to, honestly, like a third grader. It felt like that. It felt like they don't have the behavioral skills of the age that they currently are at.
Right.
So I had to understand, I had to meet them where they're at. So when I'm speaking to a sixth grader, I put my camp counselor hat on. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna be so hyped up. When I speak to a high schooler, I'm more of like, oh, we're boys, we're friends. And it's very like vulnerable. Mm-hmm. It's very, I use comedy in my shows. I really kind of try to make it less kind of intense and more approachable. So I kind of change how I present per class or per age group, but my favorite age group to ever present against or in front of is that middle school because they're just so high energy and I love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what you do where you're going around the country and touring things like that. How is it getting into doing something like that? That's a different career path than most people take.
By the grace of God. 5 years ago I was suicidal. I did not have a plan for my life. I had a plan to end my life. I didn't think anything was possible. I ended up calling the suicide prevention hotline and I got this sense of, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who feels this way. And not only that, my mom, she's actually a school adjustment counselor in Brockton. So she's a counselor at West Junior High. Okay. And I remember for her, one day she's cleaning the kitchen and a pamphlet fell out of her purse. And this pamphlet was for a nonprofit called Minding Your Mind. Now, they're a mental health organization that has young adults go into schools and share their story, and it happens to be a profession. I was like, okay, cool, I guess I'm gonna do this. So I actually signed up, and I started off as being a young adult speaker, so for Minding Your Mind.
Oh, wow.
And that's how I got my start. And then this year is the first full year of me taking a step out on my own to then travel the country and share my story.
And how many places have you spoken at so far this year, or I guess last year? Right?
So last year I spoke a total of 22 times.
Wow.
This year I'm speaking 32 times in the first 3 months of the year.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can talk about living out of a suitcase.
Yeah, literally. It's gonna be a lot, but I love it in the sense of I'm also carrying my toolbox with me, right? So in my first tour, I'm not going to lie to you, I was burnt out. I'm sure. And this year, the intention is to never go on stage empty. It's to never go on stage with the illusion that I have everything well put together when I don't. So how can I actually continue to pour into my glass before I go on that stage and then pour into other people?
So how do you build up and do that?
Well, the word pour actually uses an acronym, POUR. Pause. Instead of like trying to be on this rush of a hamster wheel, how can I pause and take time for myself? O, how can I become an objective observer of my feelings and thoughts instead of trying to internalize it and judge it? And then how can you understand what I need and why I need it? A lot of times I'm on that hamster wheel, I'm just kind of like from survival mode. I'm not even understanding what my body needs. In fact, there's another acronym called holdout states. Are you hungry, overwhelmed? Are you lonely? Are you dehydrated? Are you overstimulated? Are you understimulated? Or are you tired? That is a helpful checklist for me now of like a lot of times when I would turn to my negative coping skills, I wasn't aware that I was really lonely. I was really overstimulated. I was really understimulated. I was very dehydrated. I needed water. And I was doing all these negative things. So now I check in with myself. Okay. And then the last one are, how can I rewrite that narrative that we all tell ourselves about ourselves that's negative and is no longer serving us? Mm-hmm. I'll be very honest with you. Before I came to this tour, I was like, I'm very anxious. What if tomorrow it doesn't go well at all? What if I drop the microphone and like 1,000 kids laugh at me? But how can I rewrite that narrative? How can I look for evidence of that story I'm telling myself to be true? It's not. It's just my anxiety working on overtime. And then how can I now take a step back to rewrite that narrative? Okay. And that's what I do for myself.
Okay. And if somebody thinks that they have anxiety, right? Yeah. Maybe they haven't spoken to anybody about it and they of whatever age, what do you think the first thing that they should do is?
That's a great question. And this advice may sound counterintuitive, not to try to label it in the beginning. Because sometimes, is it really anxiety or is it stress? I think there's a lot of information right now, or it's a lot of more of a normal conversation to be like, oh, I have anxiety. And it's not really clear, is it anxiety or is it stress? The difference is, stress is your response to an external thing, a deadline, a paper that's due, a girlfriend you want to talk to because you find her attractive. But anxiety is how your body responds to stress. So it's like, do you get the clammy hands? You get the tunnel vision? Do you get the sudden, you can't really breathe because your chest is so tight? That's why they call it a disorder. If it disrupts the order of your normal day-to-day life, that's what I would classify as anxiety. If you're having sleepless nights, if you can't eat because your stomach feels very much like you can't even put food in it. If you are having these thoughts of like you're ruminating on these what if patterns and it's disrupting your daily life, that's anxiety. But I think we have to educate people on what is anxiety versus normal stress. And there is such thing as good stress. But I would recommend, on the second part of that question, I would recommend really getting comfortable talking to somebody. And it doesn't have to be a professional right away. It could really just be, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, partner, hey, friend, I've been feeling like this. Can I just try to talk to you about it? And I don't need you to fix me. I just really need you to hear me. And then from that notion, I would recommend seeking out a mental health professional. And there's a plethora of resources that I have on my website to help people with that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that'll be my final question is where can people find you?
Yeah, they can find me at weswoodson.com. So my name, WESWOODSON.com. And then Wes Woodson on all social medias, from YouTube to Instagram to TikTok.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Wes, thank you so much for coming in tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
Thank you again for watching. You can find all of our other content at fcatv.org. Thank you so much.